It does not start with shouting. It does not begin with betrayal. It does not walk into your marriage like a storm you can see coming. It begins quietly, almost gently, a thought, a feeling, a small shift in how you see your spouse. And before you realize it, something sacred begins to crack. You think the greatest threat to your marriage is infidelity, or money problems, or incompatibility. But the truth is harder to accept. Satan's #1 strategy against your marriage is division. Not loud division, not obvious division, subtle division, the kind you ignore, the kind you excuse, the kind you call just a phase. And that is exactly why it works. Because you do not fight what you do not see. You see, Satan does not need to destroy your marriage in a single moment. He only needs to separate your hearts, 1 inch at a time. One misunderstanding, one unspoken hurt, one moment of pride, and suddenly, you are no longer standing together. You are standing apart. You are still in the same house. Still sleeping in the same bed. Still wearing the same rings. But your hearts are drifting. And that drift is not accidental. It is intentional. Because the enemy understands something many couples forget. Unity is power. The moment you and your spouse truly become one, you become dangerous to everything that stands against God. That is why the attack is not random. It is targeted. The goal is simple. Break the connection. Interrupt the unity. Silence the agreement between you. Because once agreement is broken, everything else becomes easier to destroy. Communication breaks down, respect fades, intimacy weakens, trust erodes, and slowly, love begins to feel like effort instead of joy. But it never starts there. It starts small. It starts when you stop giving your spouse the benefit of the doubt. You begin to assume the worst. They don't care. They don't respect me. They always do this. Those thoughts feel real. They feel justified. But many times, they are seeds. Seeds planted to change your perception. Because if the enemy can change how you see your spouse, he can change how you treat them. And if he can change how you treat them, he can change what your marriage becomes. You begin to respond instead of understand. You react instead of listen. You defend instead of connect. And now, two people who once felt inseparable, begin to feel like opponents. This is the strategy. Turn partners into adversaries. Turn unity into tension. Turn love into competition. And the most dangerous part is this. You think the problem is your spouse. So you fight them, instead of fighting for them. You raise your voice. You withdraw your affection. You build walls instead of bridges. And all the while, the real enemy remains untouched, unchallenged, unseen. You were never meant to fight each other. You were meant to fight together. But division flips that. It rewrites the narrative. It makes you forget who is on your side. And suddenly, your marriage becomes a battlefield, where both of you are losing. Because in a divided marriage, there are no winners. Only distance. Only silence. Only pain. Have you ever noticed how quickly small issues become big ones? How a simple misunderstanding turns into a full argument? How one careless word leads to hours, sometimes days, of tension? That is not coincidence. That is escalation. And escalation is a tool. The enemy magnifies small things, until they feel unbearable. He whispers things like, "This is always happening. They will never change. You deserve better. Why even try anymore?" And those whispers, if left unchecked, become beliefs. And beliefs shape behavior. So you begin to pull back. You stop trying as hard. You stop being as patient. You stop showing grace. Not because you want to, but because your heart is tired. And that is exactly the point. If he can exhaust your love, he can weaken your covenant. If he can make you emotionally drained, he can make you spiritually vulnerable. Because when you are tired, you stop fighting for what matters. You settle. You disconnect. You survive, instead of build. But your marriage was never meant to be something you survive. It was meant to be something you steward. Something you protect. Something you fight for, even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard. Here is what many couples miss. The enemy studies patterns. He watches your habits. He learns your triggers. He pays attention to what hurts you, and what hurts your spouse. And then, he uses that knowledge. Not in dramatic ways, but in consistent ways. He knows when to bring up old wounds. He knows when to create misunderstandings. He knows when to attack your patience. And most of the time, it happens when you are already vulnerable. When you are stressed. When you are tired. When life is already overwhelming. Because that is when your guard is down. That is when your reactions are quicker, and your grace is thinner. And in those moments, division slips in easily. A harsh word. A cold response. A moment of silence that lasts too long. And now, the distance grows. But here is the truth you need to hold on to. Division only works, if you allow it to stay. It only grows, if you do not confront it. It only destroys, if you do not fight back. Because no matter how strong the attack is, unity is stronger. But unity is not automatic. It is intentional. It is a choice you make, again and again. Even when you do not feel like it. Even when your emotions say otherwise. Even when your pride resists. Unity requires humility. It requires you to pause when you want to react. To listen when you want to speak. To understand when you want to be understood. And that is not easy. Because your flesh wants to win. Your flesh wants to be right. Your flesh wants to protect itself. But your marriage is not built on winning arguments. It is built on protecting connection. Every time you choose pride, you create distance. Every time you choose humility, you restore closeness. And that is how you break the strategy. Not with grand gestures, but with daily decisions. Small choices that say, we are on the same side. Even when it is hard. Even when it hurts. Even when you feel misunderstood. Because love is not proven in perfect moments. It is proven in difficult ones. When you choose patience over anger. When you choose kindness over criticism. When you choose forgiveness, instead of keeping score. Those moments matter more than you think. They rebuild what division tries to tear down. They restore what silence tries to break. They remind both of you that your marriage is worth fighting for. But there is something even deeper. Something many couples overlook. Spiritual disconnection. You can be emotionally present, but spiritually distant. You can talk every day, but never pray together. You can share a home, but not share your faith. And when that happens, your foundation weakens. Because a marriage without spiritual unity becomes easier to divide. Prayer is not just a ritual. It is protection. It aligns your hearts. It softens your attitudes. It reminds you that your marriage is not just a contract. It is a covenant. And covenants require covering. When you pray together, you invite God into the space where division tries to grow. You expose the enemy's strategy. You break the silence. You strengthen your bond. And that does not mean everything becomes perfect. But it does mean you are no longer fighting alone. Because a marriage centered on God has a defense system the enemy cannot easily penetrate. Still, many ignore this. They rely only on communication, only on feelings, only on effort, and those things matter. But without spiritual unity, they are not enough. Because this battle is not just emotional. It is spiritual, and spiritual battles require spiritual responses. You cannot defeat a spiritual strategy with natural effort alone. You need awareness. You need discernment. You need to recognize what is really happening. That moment when you feel distant is not just a feeling. That argument that escalates quickly is not just a coincidence. That tension that lingers is not just bad timing. Look deeper. Ask yourself, what is trying to separate us right now? What is trying to create distance? What is trying to make us forget who we are to each other? Because once you see it, you can fight it. Not by attacking your spouse, but by protecting your unity. Speak life, even when it is hard. Show grace, even when it is undeserved. Choose love, even when it is inconvenient. Because every time you do that, you weaken the strategy. You disrupt the pattern. You remind the enemy that your marriage is not easily broken. And yes, there will be moments when you fail. Moments when you react. Moments when you say the wrong thing. Moments when distance creeps in. But failure is not the end. It is an opportunity to reconnect. To apologize. To restore. To try again. Because strong marriages are not built on perfection. They are built on persistence. The willingness to keep choosing each other. Over and over again, even after mistakes, even after conflict, even after hurt. That is what makes your marriage powerful. Not the absence of problems, but the presence of commitment. A commitment that says, we will not let division win. We will not let small things grow into big walls. We will not let silence replace connection. We will not let pride take the place of love. And most importantly, we will not forget who the real enemy is. Because once you remember that, everything changes. You stop taking everything personally. You stop assuming the worst. You stop reacting out of emotion and start responding with intention. You become more patient, more understanding, more united, and that unity becomes your greatest defense. So when the tension comes, pause. When the misunderstanding happens, lean in. When the distance starts to grow, close the gap. Do not ignore it. Do not excuse it. Do not let it sit. Because what you tolerate will grow. And what you confront can be healed. Your marriage is too valuable to leave unprotected. Too sacred to treat casually. Too powerful to let division destroy. So guard it. Fight for it. Pray over it. Speak life into it. Choose each other, daily. Because the enemy's strategy may be subtle, but your response can be stronger. And in the end, it is not the absence of attacks that defines your marriage. It is how you stand when they come. Together, united, unshaken, because a marriage that refuses to divide becomes a marriage that cannot be easily defeated. And that kind of marriage is exactly what the enemy fears most.